You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward. Here's your host, Leanne Langford.
Hi, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, the podcast where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your host, Leanne Langford. I am the president of Training Pros. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company where we like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us find you the consultant to start your project with confidence. I'm excited today. I have had such good conversations with this guest. My guest today is Anita Zanchettin, the Director of Talent Development from DoorDash. Welcome, Anita.
Thanks, Leanne. I'm looking forward to the conversation too.
So, Anita, let's just start off with explaining to our audience who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So I lead talent development for DoorDash. I lead talent development globally, and I lead talent development across our brands, which are conveniently listed behind my head here. So DoorDash, Wolt, which is based in Helsinki, global reach, and Deliveroo, based in London and global reach. And the way I like to think about talent development is two things. Number one is leaders are my customer. It's a theme you'll hear in our conversation, actually. So that's one important aspect of talent development. How can I get closer to the customer, closer to the leaders? And the second, one of the philosophies that I have is that leaders are true force multipliers. And what I mean by that is the stronger the bench of leaders, think about the reach that they have. They create the culture, they role model the culture, they develop their teams, they have an impact on the organization. So that's how I look at talent development. And it's a fantastic career, love it.
I love that way of looking at what talent development is for a corporate leader. So we all have I call it our origin story. What got you to learning and development? What attracted you here?
I have a bit of an unusual origin story, to be honest with you. So I love math. I love solving puzzles. I really enjoyed algebra and calculus, believe it or not. And when I was right before my last year in high school, seriously looking at engineering schools, clearly I took a different turn here. My dad, who was a civil engineer, came home from work one day and said, "Hey, we're all moving as a family to Tehran, Iran." Off we went to Tehran the summer before my senior year in high school. And I had this incredible, truly a life-changing experience, to be honest with you, Leanne. It was a school that had kids from all over the world, including from Iran. And I just became another puzzle to solve. I became fascinated in how does culture impact how we see the world, how we show up. And so instead of studying engineering, I ended up studying languages. I was a French and Spanish major for undergraduate. And then I got a graduate degree in intercultural leadership. Yes, there is such a thing, looking at how culture impacts how we lead. That was my career trajectory to start out in L&D. I worked for a consulting company, helping leaders who are relocating in global roles. And then I'm a very curious person. I kept expanding and looking at other things. I started working around global leadership in general, DEI, and then in the corporate world in L&D and talent development. So it's been a bit of a journey, but the theme throughout all of it has been I've always been attracted to organizations that have a very strong mission statement. DoorDash's mission statement is to empower local economies. And so working for a place that has really smart leaders who are very dedicated, customer focused. But it's been a journey like this, but always the thread of leadership throughout the whole thing.
I love that story. And secondly, we should get together offline away from work because I was in school. I was heavily into math. Puzzles, games, things like that. And honestly, my first track I started in college was computer science.
I actually, it's funny you say that because I actually find that puzzle solving and math background helps me in this role. Because if you think about talent development is very complex today. And so it is a bit of a puzzle. It's like, where are you going to focus your attention and what does that look like? And how do we measure it? And so there's still a math element of it that's actually very satisfying for me. And so it feels like I didn't totally abandon that side of my interest level. But yes, we should talk more about that for sure.
Love it. If you weren't on the other coast, I'd invite you over for game night with my smart mathy
Yes.
kids.
Yes, 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 yes.
Great. Well, so you've been in L&D a while, like I
Yes.
have. What are the most impactful changes you've seen in the last few years?
Well, it's definitely been interesting over the years. In thinking about this question, I would frame it in how I look at talent development. And so, again, if the first pillar for me for talent development is customer obsession, getting close to the leaders, think about the leaders that we work with every day. Think about how their world has changed today as compared to even 2 years ago, honestly, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The pace, the complexity, the need to be incredibly fungible and adaptable. And so, if you get inside the world of the leaders, that answers that question for us, which what has changed, it's the reality of the leaders has changed a lot. So, getting into their world helps us to get closer to it. If you think about it, it really relates to how we show up then for leaders. And so, probably one of the top questions that I'm asked for people who are not in our field is, wait a minute, you're in learning and development. How do you teach leaders something? I don't get how you do that. And I always say, what's something you're learning outside of work right now? And how are you learning it? And typically it's some combination of somebody is showing me or teaching me, I'm practicing it, and I'm getting feedback on it. But how that happens today is probably via YouTube or AI or something really more sped up than it was in the previous eras. And so that's the same thing is how can we then create that environment for leaders where they get what they want when they want it in the same modality that they're used to outside of work. And so that's the first thing is customer obsession. The second thing is development is not an event, like a thing we go to. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how do we show up in the flow of work with leaders? And again, if you think about today's context, in the flow of work, we have probably a very small slice of time. And so the examples there to me are things like imagine you're a leader and it's time for annual feedback and you're there writing the feedback and you're having that moment of, wait a minute, what is a good example of feedback right there in the tool? Is an example for you. Like that's that development in the moment. Or you get results from an engagement survey and you have a low scoring area, and then a Slack is sent to you immediately that tells you, hey, this is how you can help with your team in this area, which, by the way, those two examples are from things we do at DoorDash. And so that sort of development is not an event. And then the last one, I'm going to steal something from a mentor of mine who always said, it's not about activities, it's about making progress. And I think that this is the area that's most fascinating to me. The rigor that we have around measurement has dramatically improved, I think, especially over the last few years, both for input metrics in terms of satisfaction and what we look at and learning lift. And then I think we're doing a better job of tying it to output metrics like retention or retaining top talent in particular. So I think that those three areas of the customer obsession, the development, not an event, and then it's progress, not activities, tying those together is really, to me, how the landscape has changed.
Fantastic. I loved a lot of those things you were talking about just now. The learning in the flow of work is something that's coming up more and more on this
Mm.
podcast. And I've been recently doing a little research into how people are using AI, and the more advanced users of AI who've gone past just adopting it are now learning in the flow of work, is how they're trying to use the new AI stuff.
I think to me, the interesting inflection point around AI is it feels to me at least like table stakes that we're all using AI to help with our own efficiency in writing, designing, whatever it is. But to me, it's the key to unlock it is how we're using AI to deliver for our customer. Like, what does that look like? And so that's the next, are we being as creative about that, which is quite fascinating. And again, this is how our leaders are learning. This is how they're taking on new skills. So if we're not there alongside with them, then we're left behind.
You've talked a lot about where you've seen the changes. Where do you think we're going? What is the next iteration? What do we see in the future?
To me, it's interesting. I see two completely opposite directions, so to say. One is this super hyper personalized learning experience. And a lot of that is related to AI. That the examples that I gave that I get the results Slack to me where my team scored a lower engagement score. It's very personalized to me. I get the answers I need when I need them. I think that AI gives us a lot of flexibility to do that, where it feels very hyper personalized. At the other end of the spectrum, I also see a lot of focus on, at the leadership level, how are we expanding our capability as org level leaders, like bigger picture leaders. And so on the one hand, I might be getting my development in a more hyper focused way, but at the same time, on a leadership level, how are we having impact across the organization? How are we showing up as enterprise leaders instead of just SMEs in my vertical? How are we connecting the dots across our global organization? How are we looking at working in cross-functional leadership pods and delivering results for our customer that way? So that to me is fascinating, that push for leaders to think more this way and less this way. We spend quite a bit of time on that with leaders here. And one of the ways that we look at it is how are they then connecting the dots across the different organizations globally and across the different functions. So it's a fascinating, again, going deeper and going broader at the same time.
I'm fascinated by that. That I was just my last meeting, we were talking about how leadership development is changing and how much different it is now than what it was just 5 years ago. So I'm eager to see where it's going and to hear more about this model you're talking about and the way you're approaching leadership development. So Anita, you mentioned one of my favorite words just a few minutes ago. Who has been your most influential professional mentor?
So I have been so fortunate. I've had many amazing mentors, have mentors now. I also am very dedicated to mentoring myself. I love it. I was thinking about this question, and I would have to say that it was somebody early in my career. Her name is Rita Bennett, and she is the person who started a consulting company doing cross-cultural global leadership. She was an important mentor to me for many reasons. First off, she was an amazing role model. She just had a vision and made it happen. And she started a company and she brought the right people around. She scaled the company. Amazing to watch her in action, especially as a woman. I really learned a ton from her. The thing that stands out for why she's such a great mentor, and this is what stays with me, is she was always looking at ways to stretch and grow people, me in particular. So it was always you can do it, giving me feedback, giving me harder and harder roles. And I just remember this is, again, early in my career. So here I am in my, I don't know, mid 20s, standing up in front of all these professionals who are leading large organizations and facilitating leadership development for them. Actually, when I look back on it, I think, wow, amazing. But she helped me to know, yes, you can do that. Yes, you can do that. And so it's something I keep in mind is how are we as leaders stretching people? How are we helping them grow? And hey, guess what? How do you do that? By experience. You have to get thrown right in there and then get feedback and then get better at it. So I'm incredibly grateful to her for I felt at the time she was taking a chance on me. And I learned a lot from her, definitely.
That's wonderful story. It's amazing. I feel like any of us who've gotten anywhere in L&D had a great mentor or more. And I feel like it's also our duty to be a good mentor to others at the same time.
Totally agree. And it's interesting because I think there's formal mentoring, and then I go back to leaders as force multipliers. If you as a leader have part of what you're doing, that you're looking actively at how are you growing your team, how are you stretching your team, again, the impact you have not only on the company that you work for, but exponentially in that person's life and career is pretty exciting. I mean, you could have a really big impact, and how gratifying is that, right?
Very gratifying. I love getting back together with them for dinner or lunch or something and just hear, what are you doing now? Where have you gone?
Exactly.
Amazing thing
Exactly.
you up to?
Yes.
Um, so what do you think is the most important skill in the workplace right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm going to give a not typical answer again. I actually don't think it's a skill. I think it's I don't know, mindset, an approach. I think it's about being in learner mindset and being really fungible. So instead of being a specialized SME, leaders who succeed today are the ones who can flex into different geographies, flex into different roles, almost like the general manager profile, right? Where you do multiple things. And so how do you develop that skill to be fungible and have a learner mindset? So a lot of it is just, again, stretching and growing. So I see that as more important than like a specific, I know I need to learn this skill. And it's fascinating to watch leaders who lean into that. I was talking to a leader just the other day. There was a change management thing going on. And she said to me, well, I'm trying to get my team over this change management and to the other side of it. And I said to her, So yeah, great. And this is how it's always going to be. So it's less about getting over the thing and more about how do we create that adaptability that this is the reality. There's a lot of change and it's something that we thrive in. So I'm fascinated by that profile of leaders who super experienced and they're still learning. They have a learner mindset, beginner mindset, and they're really fungible. I think that's the key.
I like that you give different answers. Um, and that was I really had a good reaction to that. It's like, when is this change going to be over? Change is the
I know.
norm.
Yes,
That's just what
exactly.
is happening every day now.
Yeah, exactly. Who can predict actually? It'll be really interesting to see how we continue to evolve, but I think that what will serve us well is that adaptability, that open mindset, and then it's a lot easier to take on board the skills that maybe you and I aren't even thinking about right now, right?
Exactly. I mean, honestly, I can't even picture what next year is going to look like. I'm just worried
Yes.
about, let me keep up with today.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Anita, what is your favorite source for industry news and information?
My favorite source tends to be talking to people more than podcasts or events or sessions. I like these kinds of podcasts because it's talking to people. Like this format of hearing from people resonates really well for me. I'm very fortunate. I have a great network of people that I've worked with over the years. I keep in touch with them. What's new? What are you hearing? What are you thinking? I do go to conferences and things like that, but I tend to get a lot more information this way through conversations more than anything else, more than reading and things like that. Although I do that also, but I love connecting with people.
I love that. And honestly, that's one of the things I love most about my job is it's my job to connect with people. So I get to talk to people all day.
Yeah, and it sparks a lot of ideas. You hear one person share a story. And so I was listening to a couple of the other podcasts that you did, and every one it was like, oh, yeah, that's right. That would apply here, or that's an interesting thought. So helping make those connections really helps a lot. The one thing that I would say is that it helps me to go outside of our field. And so to talk to people who perhaps are not in talent development or L&D, it sparks different ideas also, different ways of thinking about things.
Absolutely. I do love talking to people in different industries. And I even belong to like kind of entrepreneur mastermind kind of group. So it's people from, oh, they have no comprehension what I do for a living. So you get to hear all kinds of different viewpoints on everything.
Yeah, it's great. It really helps a lot. It helps spark new ideas and new thinking. Yeah.
Last question, my favorite one. What is one book everyone wanting to be an L&D leader should read?
So I'm going to keep on the theme of answering in a non-traditional way. However, you're going to know why when I tell you the book. This is a book that's been around a while, and I had the privilege of seeing the author in person, and it was fascinating. So I actually wrote it down so I can make sure I say it correctly, and I'll tell you why I think it's an awesome book. Maybe you've heard of this before. It's called The Medici Effect. Nice Italian name, Medici. The Medicis from the Renaissance era, right? And it's written by Franz Johansson, who's an amazing author and amazing speaker also. What he did is he looked at what was happening in Italy during the Renaissance when you had painters and scientists and poets all thrown together in this creative burst. And he did studies of how that shows up in business. And so, for example, he has one example in the book that I love of there was a hotel chain looking to build hotels basically in the middle of the desert and really concerned about power outages and things like that. So they brought in people with a background in understanding animal behavior, and they actually studied termites and how termites keep their termite, abodes cold, and they mirrored that for how they look at building a cooling system in the hotel. I am fascinated by the intersection of completely different fields and completely different people. And I've actually done some sessions facilitating with leaders where you take two completely opposite ideas, you throw them together, and you say, okay, I'm just looking at random things on my desk, like you've got, Scotch tape and you've got a pen. Now, how does this apply to what you're trying to solve? And you make them make the connection across disparate ideas. It's amazing how much creativity it sparks. And so I love this book because I think it gets at it. To me, it tells the story of when you're in L&D, when you're in talent development, if we just stay in our bubble, we're not going to be as impactful or as creative. And so what are those different voices that we're bringing into our world, and how are we thinking more creatively? Anyway, I love the book. It's awesome. I've read it several times. Highly recommend.
I will put it on my Audible list for my next read. I'm almost through with my current book.
Yes.
And I love that idea of, we have to escape the L&D bubble.
Yeah.
We can become an echo chamber and we become irrelevant.
It's inspiring if you connect with, if you connect with engineering leaders, how are they solving problems? If you connect with product leaders, how are they approaching customer obsession? And then how does that apply to what we're doing? It just sparks and opens up a lot of different thinking rather than, kind of within the same environment always. So yeah, I find the book very inspirational and motivating, and just thinking outside the box is really definitely a fun way to go, always.
I love it. I definitely want to take a look at that book, and it would be great if I could learn to think more outside the box. Anita, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this podcast. I know that your interview is going to help many people that are trying to learn more about being a learning and development leader. As our thank you to you, I would like to plant 5 trees in your name. Our charity at Training Pros is that we plant trees for our podcast guests, and every time we put a consultant to work. To date, we've planted more than 5,500 trees around the world, and our goal is 10,000, so we're getting there. And just thank you for joining us on the show.
My pleasure. And that's lovely. Thank you so much. I love that. That's an amazing gift. My pleasure to be here, Leanne. Great having a conversation with you.
Well, you are welcome, and I hope we get to talk many more times because I just enjoy a conversation with you. That's it for this week's episode of Learning Leader Spotlight. Join us again next week to hear from a different leader from a different industry for a different conversation.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode, and leave us a 5-star review.